17 fish, 2 hours, $0 spent on bait. Rick Hollis walked onto a stretch of Gulf Coast Beach in Fort Myers, Florida, with 2 rods, 1 cooler, and no bait shop receipt. No frozen shrimp, no cut mullet from the morning run. He crouched at the waterline, right where the waves pull back, dug his hand into the wet sand, and grabbed what old-timers on this coast have known about for over 100 years. Same beach, same tide, same overcast morning. The guy next to him, fresh shrimp, $8 a pound, went home with 2 fish. Rick went home with 17. That bait? It's sitting on the beach right now, free. Restricted or outright banned in 6 states because it works too well. Or at least, that's the official reason. Subscribe and hit that bell right now, so you never miss what the industry keeps trying to keep off your radar. Let me tell you exactly how Rick's morning played out, because the details matter. He set up 2 rods side by side, same 12-pound monofilament on both, same circle hooks, same casting distance, same trough. Left rod, fresh shrimp, bought that morning from a tackle shop on McGregor Boulevard. Good quality, not frozen, $9 a pound. Right rod, bait he'd collected from the sand at the water's edge 20 minutes earlier. Cost him absolutely nothing. Took 4 minutes to gather. First hit came on the right rod before he'd even finished rigging the left one. By 8:45 in the morning, roughly 40 minutes in, the right rod had landed 5 pompano. The left rod hadn't moved. Rick adjusted the shrimp, changed the weight, moved the rig a few feet, tried a different depth. Standard troubleshooting. Nothing. The right rod kept going. Now, Rick has been fishing that same stretch of Gulf Coast for 22 years. He learned this beach from his father, who learned it from a man named Earl Hutchins, a retired shrimper from Punta Gorda, who fished Fort Myers Beach starting in the 1950s. Earl never bought bait. Not once. He said buying bait was what you did when you didn't know the beach. And Earl wasn't unusual. The whole generation of Gulf Coast surf fishermen that existed before the tackle shop boom thought exactly the same way. The old pier regulars at Naples Pier, the dawn crews at Perdido Key in Alabama, the guys at Pensacola Beach who showed up before light with a rake and left with enough pompano to feed the whole street. None of them stopped at a shop. They knew what to look for, and they knew where to find it. Go back to a fishing column published on Florida's Gulf Coast in June 1945. It reads, "We fish heads start looking for sand fleas and pompano about the middle of April each year. There are millions of them. They are the most commonly used bait for this fish." Written 80 years ago. Available information, still completely accurate. Just nobody's putting it in front of you anymore. Because it doesn't sell anything. On Florida's Atlantic side, the Sebastian Inlet crew, the guys at Canaveral National Seashore, the Ponce Inlet regulars, same story. Pompano moved in with the warm water, old-timers moved to the shoreline with rakes before sunrise, and the coolers filled up before the tackle shops opened. In South Carolina and North Carolina, the Outer Banks community knew it too. Whiting fishermen at Cape Hatteras were doing this for generations. Sheepshead guys around Murrells Inlet were using this bait in the 1970s like it was the most obvious thing in the world. Then tackle got flashier. The big box fishing stores arrived. The YouTube algorithm started rewarding gear unboxings and lure reviews. And somehow, the one bait that had been working for over 100 years, free, always available, no credit card required, got pushed completely to the back of the conversation. Rick's 17 fish wasn't luck. It was just what happens when someone uses what actually works, instead of what they were sold. Before I show you exactly what this bait is, how to find it, how to rig it, and how to make it work on your specific target. I want to tell you about something I put together for anglers who are done with the gap between what they're catching and what they should be catching. It's called high-level fishing, the water game. Everything the tackle industry has been quietly stepping in front of for the last 30 years is in here. Reading water, how to identify productive zones in seconds, not after 20 fishless sessions. Structure and positioning where fish actually are, based on how they feed and move, not where the shop pointed you. Current and tide control, using the water's own movement as a weapon rather than fighting it. Behavior patterns, how to predict a fish's next move before it makes one. And the mental game, the mindset that separates an angler who hopes for a bite from one who goes out knowing he'll catch. No filler, no fluff. The link is in the first pinned comment. All right, the bait. Sand fleas, also called mole crabs, sand crabs, beach bugs. Depending on where you grew up fishing, you might use a different name. But you've walked past millions of them. They're small, oval-shaped crustaceans, about half an inch to just over an inch long, pale gray or tan, smooth shell. They live in the wet strip of beach, right where the waves wash up and pull back. Watch that strip of wet sand after a wave recedes, and you'll see them. Tiny oval shapes moving fast, burrowing back down before the next wave hits. Yeah, those things. Here's the history. On the Gulf Coast of Florida, anglers were documenting sand flea use for pompano as far back as the early 1900s. By the 1940s, it wasn't even a technique. It was just the standard, not a specialty approach for experienced guys. The standard. Old fishing columns, regional papers, tournament records all say the same thing. When the pompano run hit, the serious anglers showed up at the shoreline with rakes. In Louisiana, Cajun fishing communities called them sand bugs and used them for sheepshead, black drum, and redfish working the coastal marshes. That knowledge moved through those communities quietly for generations, from the Sabine Pass area down through Terrebonne Parish. It wasn't in magazines. It was what you knew if you came from a fishing family. Mississippi and Alabama were the same. Dauphin Island anglers, the Orange Beach pier crowd. Sand fleas were standard issue. You raked bait, you didn't buy it. On the West Coast, California has its own species. Retired analog, the Pacific mole crab, slightly larger. And Southern California surf anglers used it for corbina and surf perch for decades. Old-timers from Santa Monica to San Diego still consider the Pacific mole crab the #1 natural bait for corbina. No competition. And California now limits how many you can collect and restricts net collection in protected zones. Not because the bait stopped working, but because it works so well that regulators got nervous about beach populations getting stripped. That's the pattern across 6 states with collection restrictions or designated regulated zones: California, Maryland, South Carolina, parts of New Jersey, national seashore zones in North Carolina, and protected beach corridors in Florida. The stated reason is ecological protection. That's legitimate. Sand fleas are part of the food web, and commercial stripping isn't good for anyone. But it's worth asking why the bait restrictions consistently land on the things that catch the most fish, while every synthetic product on the shelf faces exactly 0 regulation. The bait is free. It's legal to collect in reasonable personal use quantities across most of the country. And it has been producing fish on American beaches for over a century. Here's why it works on a biological level. Once you understand this, the artificial bait shelf looks completely different. Pompano, redfish, whiting. None of these species are primarily visual hunters in the surf zone. The water is too turbulent, too full of suspended sand to rely on sight. What they use is their olfactory system, and it is extraordinarily sensitive. Florida pompano, Trachinotis carolinus, can detect amino acid compounds dissolved in seawater at concentrations as low as 1 part per billion. 1 part per billion. That's the equivalent of finding a single drop of something dissolved in a 10,000-gallon tank. That's the detection threshold you're working with every time you put a bait in the water. When a live sand flea goes on a hook and enters the surf zone, it starts releasing a very specific chemical profile. Chitin compounds from the shell surface, free amino acids from the muscle tissue, glycine, alanine, taurine, betaine. These aren't random compounds. They're the exact same chemicals that release every time a wave breaks over a sandy beach and crushes sand fleas in the wash, which happens thousands of times a day, on every sandy beach. Every single day. Fish evolved alongside this. For millions of years, the sound and chemistry of a breaking wave in shallow surf has been a food delivery signal. Wave breaks, sand fleas get tumbled and crushed. Amino acids disperse through the water column. Pompano respond. It's a hardwired trigger, not a preference, not a learned behavior. Survival coding built into the nervous system. When you put a live hooked sand flea into a trough 10 yards off the beach, you're not imitating that signal. You're producing it. Live. Continuous. The flea moves its legs, the scent disperses in real time, and the fish responds exactly the way it would if a natural wave had just delivered food. Compare that to what the tackle industry sells. The premium scent sprays on the market, the ones running $14 to $18 a bottle, contain synthetic amino acid compounds designed to replicate exactly this chemical profile. Glycine, betaine, some form of taurine. The formulas are sophisticated. Some of them work. But here's the problem. A spray application saturates the water around the bait in the first few minutes, then fades. The compounds disperse, degrade, or get washed away by current. The signal drops off fast. A live sand flea releases continuously and dynamically, in real time, in response to stress and movement. The signal doesn't fade. It intensifies when the fish approaches, because the flea responds to pressure changes in the water. The fish knows the difference. Behavioral research on pompano feeding, including published studies on Trachinotis carolinus foraging behavior, shows that pompano display a significantly stronger and more sustained feeding response to live sand flea stimuli than to artificial scent applications, even high-quality formulations. There's a texture component, too. Fish don't just bite and swallow. They evaluate. When a pompano bites a piece of scent-soaked soft plastic or an artificial shrimp, the texture is wrong. Too uniform, no shell resistance, no give at the right pressure point. That bite lasts a fraction of a second before the fish ejects it. You felt a bump. Fish gone. A live sand flea has the correct shell-to-meat feedback. The fish bites, the texture confirms what the smell already promised, and it doesn't let go. That's why hook sets with sand fleas tend to be clean and deep. The fish commits fully. Scientists studying pompano migration patterns along the Gulf Coast found something that makes this even clearer. Pompano populations track sand flea population density during their seasonal migrations along the coast. The fish follow the bait geographically, which means on a beach with high sand flea density, you're not just putting out an attractive scent, you're fishing in the biological pantry. Now, the actual how-to. Everything you need to walk onto any sandy American beach and leave with bait before your coffee gets cold. They concentrate in areas with steady, moderate wave action. Not inside the heaviest break, but slightly shoreward of it, in the shallow wash. Low tide is your best collection window. The hour before and the hour after low tide is when the swash zone is widest, sand fleas are closest to the surface, and you can cover the most ground efficiently. On Florida's Gulf side, Fort Walton Beach, St. Pete, Naples, you'll find higher concentrations during the spring and fall pompano runs than anywhere else in the country. To catch them barehanded, wait for a wave to pull back, spot your V-ripple, cup your hand flat to the sand surface, push forward and down in a scooping motion, lift. You'll come up with sand. Sift it fast through your fingers, and you'll see them. Small, oval, pale gray, legs moving. They don't bite. They don't pinch. They're completely harmless. Want to collect faster? Get a sand flea rake. It's a rectangular mesh scoop on a long handle. About $20 to $25 at any coastal tackle shop. Lasts for years. Push it along the bottom of the swash zone during a wave reseed, scoop up, and shake. Dozen or more in one pass. On a productive beach in good conditions, a bucket full takes under 10 minutes. What you need? A small bucket or bait container filled with fresh beach seawater. Not tap water. Fresh water kills them within minutes. A sand flea rake if you have one. Optional but much faster than hands. A small battery-powered aerator for long sessions. Under $15 at any bait shop. Keeps them alive all day. Keep them alive as long as possible. Live sand fleas dramatically outperform dead ones. In fresh seawater with periodic changes every 90 minutes or so, they stay alive 3 to 4 hours easily, with an aerator running most of the day. Collect them at first light for a morning session and change the water once around mid-morning. You're set, more than you'll use in a day. Rinse them with fresh water, pat dry, freeze in a Ziploc bag. Frozen sand fleas still work well. They lose the live movement, but the chemical profile, the amino acids and chitin compounds, stays intact through the freeze. Serious Gulf Coast pompano anglers keep a bag in the freezer through winter and pull them out for off-season jetty trips. Thaw them in seawater the morning of your trip. Rigging. Use a circle hook. For pompano and whiting, size 120. For redfish, black drum, or sheep's head, step up to 20 or 30. The pompano rigs sold in tackle shops. The ones with 2 or 3 dropper loops, small colorful floats, and beads are purpose-built for this bait. The beads and floats add a visual trigger that works alongside the scent. Use them. Hook placement. Go through the tail fan. The telson. The flat appendage at the very back of the flea. Push the hook point in gently from underneath. Try not to puncture the body cavity. A properly tail-hooked sand flea stays alive on the hook for a long time, keeps its legs moving naturally, and maximizes the chemical release into the surrounding water. Weight, 1 to 1.5 ounces, is the standard for most surf conditions. Go lighter in calm, clear water. Heavier in heavy surge. The goal is enough weight to hold position in the trough without pinning the bait completely dead on the bottom. You want the flea to move. 3 additions that push this even further and cover every single sense a surf fish uses to hunt. First, menhaden oil. A small bottle, $8 to $10 at coastal tackle shops, lasts months. A light coat on the rig and on the sand flea before casting amplifies the chemical signal and extends its range in the water column. Menhaden operates on a different chemical channel than the sand flea's amino acid profile. It's a lipid-based, oily scent trail that carries further and persists longer in moving water. The flea handles the close-range amino acid trigger. The menhaden handles the long-range scent trail that brings the fish into the zone. In murky water, in lower visibility conditions near inlets, when targeting redfish, this combination is hard to beat. Second, The double flea presentation. 2 sand fleas on the same hook instead of 1. First flea through the tail, second pierced lightly at the side. Doubles the chemical output, increases visual mass, creates more movement. This is standard practice in Florida's serious pompano tournament circuit, where the top anglers are fishing for count, and every edge matters. More scent, more movement, more commitment from the fish when it bites. Third, for sheep's head around structure, pair a sand flea on one dropper loop with a small piece of fresh barnacle or oyster on the second. Sheep's head feed on hard structure crustaceans, barnacles, small crabs, mussels, and they use different feeding cues than open surf species, covering both their olfactory profile and their tactile expectations with a 2-bait rig, fished tight against jetty rocks or bridge pilings in the tidal current, is one of the most effective sheep's head presentations you can run. With those 3 modifications, your rig is producing signal across olfaction, chemistry, movement, visual profile, and texture simultaneously. You're not waiting for a fish to find you. You're broadcasting across every biological channel it uses to hunt. Now, let's talk about why none of this is front and center at Bass Pro Shops. The U.S. recreational fishing tackle market moves approximately $14 billion a year. A large portion of that comes from bait products, cut bait packages, frozen shrimp, prepared synthetic baits, scent sprays, artificial soft plastics engineered to imitate natural prey. That entire product category exists to fill the gap between what's on the beach for free and what the consumer actually knows about. Look at the active ingredients on any premium fish attractant spray on the market. What are you reading? Amino acid compounds, betaine, glycine, sometimes taurine. You're reading the synthetic, laboratory-produced version of exactly what a live sand flea releases into the water for free. A longtime charter captain working Florida's Gulf Coast, someone who has been running surf and nearshore trips out of Fort Myers Beach for close to 20 years, said something at a regional fishing seminar that got quietly buried in the recap notes afterward. I haven't bought bait in 15 years. I take my clients to the waterline when they arrive and show them how to collect it themselves. Most of them catch more in that first session than they have in years of fishing with store-bought. The tournament records say the same thing. The consistent top finishers in Florida's Pompano surf tournaments are not showing up with commercial bait. They show up with rakes. Multiple years of results from events like the Pompano Beach Surf Classic and regional Gulf Coast competitions show the same pattern at the top of the leaderboard. Live sand fleas, collected that morning, not purchased from a shop. The information is out there. It's just not profitable to put on a YouTube thumbnail.